Going to be talking about today are databases. So if you look at the database stuff that AWS has listed, they have all this stuff right here. We're going to focus on the top two for kind of this session. So what do people want to kind of learn about first? Do they want to learn about their SQL database or their NoSQL database? Just anyone can holler out. NoSQL? Yeah, so with a SQL database, everything's going to be relational. So you'll have to talk to it using SQL. With NoSQL, it kind of just stores everything as JSON. That's at least the SQL versus NoSQL part of it. They also get widely different in how you use them and what they can do, which we'll go into. But yeah. All right. So, and if you're following along, yeah, I recommend you follow along. So we're gonna go DynamoDB. DynamoDB. When I hover over, it says it's a managed NoSQL database. Let's go and let's make one. Alright, so we'll create a table. And with Dynamo, this is one of the pay-as-you-use kind of services. So if you have a small table, then you're not going to pay anything, not with free tier. Table name, I'm going to name this the temp table. Primary key, I'm just going to make it an ID. I'll make it a number, and that should be good. So just for a little bit about databases, the primary key is what differentiates items from each other within the table. Okay, and we're going to do, and we're just going to do default settings right here. And we will continue. And right now what it's doing is actually making our table. So you see right here, our read-write capacity is 5 and 5 with auto-scaling disabled. They are read-write units. One read-write unit means one read unit means one read action can be done in a 60-second window, which means for each 60-second window, 5 read and 5 writes can be done to the table respectively. What you could do is, let's say you have low demand and then like very high usage of your database, you can allow it to scale up or down based on usage. Because if we look at capacity right here, see this capacity calculator? This is estimating the cost for having those read and write capacity units available. This isn't payment on the data you have, which is different. This is cost on, again, how much read capacity and write capacity you have. So if we increase one, let's say we expect this to have twice the read, it'll give us what the estimated cost per month. So with auto scaling, you could keep it low, and then when you need to, it pops back up. We're not going to need to change any of this. This is how you'd set up alarms for increasing the capacity, increasing and decreasing the capacity. So right now, no metrics, but this is where you'd kind of see information on what's happening in your database. And if we look right here, there's nothing in the database. So what we can do is we can add something. Let's create an item. So the only thing it needs is an ID, some number. I'm going to make this number 1. Oh, can't add a new line. Make that number 1. And then I'm going to add a string field. And I'm going to say, let's say name. Someone throw out a name. Jeff. All right. Jeff. Okay. So we can save that here. And now in our table, we have a single item, an ID and a name. Name being a string. Let's add another item. And this is tree mode. Let's do it in text mode. So in text mode, this is just going to be JSON. It's just going to assume the type. So we can have ID 0. Let's give count, and let's make that 10. And let's say, I don't know, type, let's say dog. And this can't have ID 0 because the other thing had the ID, let's make this ID 2. Yeah. ID 2, count 10, type dog. We'll save. And now we have another entry. One thing that you can notice is that these can be empty. In that way, you don't have to like change your database schema. If you want to add fields, you can just add an item with those fields. It's really kind of easy to use. Let's add one more item for good measure. ID 3. Give me another name. Rick. How many Ricks are there? 7 Ricks. And as you can see, it used the same fields here for these. So you can also, this is scanner query. Let's do scan. And so we can, let's find every count is a number. Let's find every number that is greater than 8. And there's 1. So this is, right here, we're kind of doing it manually for looking through it. You can, of course, do it programmatically through their CLI, AWS CLI or whatever. But you can do some basic like scanning and querying on this table. One thing that's really good about DynamoDB is it scales horizontally. What that means is if you want to make your database contain more items, you just add them. You don't have to worry about provisioning any more capacity. It just, you put more in, it just holds more. You don't have to worry about scaling in that way at all, which is something that will differ with RDS. One application they really recommend as usage for Dynamo is state for Lambda. So when we went over Lambda functions, we showed how they have the execution. They only have a 5-minute window to execute, and each Lambda function can't know the variables of the previous Lambda function. They all just start in an empty sort of blank slate. That's all you can assume. With this, you could say, I have the state, I'm going to save it in Dynamo, and then when the next Lambda function gets invoked, it'll read that state from Dynamo, do some operation, save the adjusted state in Dynamo. But this is Dynamo, the NoSQL database, kind of just at a surface skin level. Does anyone have any sort of questions about kind of Dynamo before we move on to RDS? Nice. All right, so what I'm going to do, and then this is just good policy in general for all the stuff we're doing, especially when you're playing with it, is remember to delete all your resources after you're done with them. It's not as important with Dynamo, but it will be important with RDS. So now if we go and we look at RDS, which is their Managed Relational Database Service, this is going to be much less pretty to work with. So what we're going to do is we are going to make a database that we can use. So let's create a database. I'm partial to Postgres. You can choose whatever kind of database type you want. Boom, right here. So with free tier, you'll get, I believe with RDS, it's about a month worth of, like in total, if I remember correctly, within free tier of running. Nice. So I'm going to keep everything as kind of recommended. There's no real reason to change anything. It's keeping us in free tier. Alright, let's specify a name for the database. So I'll do temp db, just because I like the temp. Oh, no. No. Temp hyphen db. Master username. Let's make this AWS master. And for password, we'll just do something kind of dead simple. I'm going to kind of let you guys also log into this database. So the password for this will be TEMP1234, temp1234, TEMP1234. And then next, we'll get into like VPCs and all that later on. You can kind of just go with what they have for right now. What we're going to change is we're going to say yes. The public internet can access it. And then create new. Database name will be, let's say, human cloud temp. Oh my goodness, this one's underscore. All right. So port 5432 is standard for Postgres. We won't enable any off. We want to make it as easy as possible to get into. These are to store kind of automated backups of it. So if you mess up your database, you can go to, in this case, back up to 7 days worth. Again, we're just going to kind of keep all of this kind of the same. So except for, we want to make it easy to delete. So we're going to remove the deletion protection. The only difference would be if we didn't do this, before we deleted it, we'd have to go click another thing that said disable deletion protection and then go back and delete it. All right. Right now it is creating, and this will take a bit of time. So I'm going to talk a bit about, so RDS, we talked about how Dynamo scaled horizontally. RDS scales more vertically. What that means is if you want your database to hold more, you have to actually provision a larger database instance and move everything from database A to database B. Yeah. The read-write capacity is also based on the database type you have. So if you need more read-write, then you either need to make a larger database, or they have database instances that are optimized for read-write. So they're smaller, they're more expensive, but they have more read-write capacity. Database instances work kind of like EC2 instances. We haven't really done much with those yet. Those would be, though we probably will get to those this semester, but it's basically like a VM. It's a VM you can use and like log into and do whatever you want with. So it has to kind of provision that and then get it set up to run Postgres in this case. Alright, so right now it's still creating. Does anyone have any questions so far about databases in AWS or RDS specifically?
What was the difference between all of those? Like one of them before, there's like a bunch of different types of databases.
Oh, yeah.
Is one different from another?
Yeah, so we can go look at those.
Yeah, I don't really remember which one.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna ignore Aurora for right now, but all of these, basically, the database has some sort of database manager that you can, like, that's what you give the SQL and the commands to, and then it does whatever it needs with the data underneath to kind of return that value to you. These are basically different database managers. So yeah, and they're all pretty big. I guess I don't. I guess I've not really heard of MariaDB, but if you do different ones, logging into them will be different. Maybe some of the commands you do and that you can do with them are different as well. Yeah. I've only really used Postgres and a little bit of Oracle, so I can't really say much to kind of all of them. But yeah, generally the differences are that you notice for like basic queries aren't going to be substantial. It's only when you're doing like heavy duty stuff where the differences start to really matter. Yeah. So let's look at this. Still creating. One thing they also have, which I haven't played with yet, is they have their Aurora serverless. Oh, I guess I'm not supposed to do. But what that will do is it's more closer to Dynamo in the horizontal scaling, where you don't have to worry about the database instance underneath. Issues I've heard people have are like cold start time. So if you don't access the database for a while, then you hit it, it might take a lot longer, which can be an issue, especially if you have like an API that needs to return data from the database. That cold start time would mean that API call would time out. I don't know how much of an issue that is. Again, I haven't really worked with it myself, but it's definitely something interesting if you want to not worry about scaling. Another thing you can do with RDS is something called read replicas. So you have your one kind of like master database instance that you can read and write to, but if you have a really read-heavy workload, you can make copies of that database that can only do write operations, so they won't change the underlying data. You still have a single point of truth for that. That way, your one database isn't getting bombarded with reads. Backing up, oh my goodness. All right. It should be pretty close. Nice. And one thing you can do is, again, you can back it up to S3 and then restore it from S3. Yeah. So in context to the project, what we will likely end up doing is, in order to save information about the kind of users and their scores and such, we'll have to look into whether we want to do that in RDS or in DynamoDB. Either one would probably work fine. Dynamo would probably work fine. RDS would be more powerful, but I don't know if that power would be necessary, based on what we're doing. But that's one thing that we'll kind of get to later on. Yeah. And do people have any kind of questions about the teams they're on right now, or while we're waiting for this to be finished? Yeah.
Yeah, what team am I on?
Yeah. If you don't have a team, we'll add you to a team if you want to at the end of this. Yeah. One use case that I have for RDS right now, uh, project that actually we're working on. Uh, we have an RDS instance with Postgres running PostGIS, which is the geographic library on top of it. We have an API that what that does is it queries the database for location values to then return through in order to place those regions on the map in order to display them. So with that, we provision the database sort of like this. I'm going to show you connecting to the database, and then AWS gives kind of examples on how you could set up your different databases to do different things. This one had to be set up to do GIS. Yeah, and then from there we could run queries on it through the API using actually Go. I just found Go personally to be kind of easier to work with for database stuff than Python. Yeah, so sometime. Yeah. So does anyone have any kind of questions so far about anything? It's funny it's taking so long to back up since it has 0 data, but yeah. It's getting there. It takes a bit of time. When we do EC2 and VPC stuff, VPC being virtual private cloud, which is actually pretty interesting. Those things will also take some time. So we might have to, at least for those, start getting set up before. And for the hosting group, who here is in the hosting team? Yeah. For, I remember the task for this week is to play with the CDN, CloudFront. CloudFront can take a bit of time to set up because it has to deploy to all of the edge servers that's being sent to. So if you do like CloudFront for the US, then all of their edge servers in the US has to send that information to. It makes it very powerful, but it also means if you make a mistake, it's painful because you have to wait like 20 minutes to realize you made a mistake and then fix it and then redeploy. Yeah, the website that we have is using a CDN. Yeah. So while we're kind of waiting for this, do the teams kind of want to meet up, and then everyone who doesn't have a team, I'll actually help you guys get a team now, so we're not just waiting on this to back up. Yeah. So if the hosting team could maybe circle around right there, API team kind of in the middle, and then front-end team kind of with Cassie. And then if you don't have a team, you can come up here and I can help get you a team.
I said that I wanted to do front end earlier, but I'm kind of unsure. Like I kind of really don't know the difference between a lot of them.
Yeah. What you can do is you can put yourself down for all of the teams if you want, and then decide later on which ones you want to
what technologies would be useful for which groups?
Yeah.
Like programming languages.
Yeah. So for the front end team, do you have a framework that you? All right.
Okay.
So they'd be using some sort of front end framework, probably Vue or React.
Okay.
To work with that, so some JavaScript there. For hosting, it will be S3, it will be CloudFront, it will be SSL, which so you'll work with CNAME records and DNS to get SSL. Like I said, CloudFront, ACM is their certificate manager to verify the domains. You'll kind of work in that area.
Okay.
For API, you'll work also with S3. You'll work with Lambda. You'll work with API Gateway. You'll work with Probably with Swagger is kind of what I use to like define an API,
Okay.
and you'll also work with You'll probably also work with Incognito. It's a way of kind of creating users
Okay.
and authenticating users.
Stick with front end at first.
All right. Yeah. Nice. So
How many people are there in like the API team? I guess.
I think right now there are like 4 people, 4 or 5. Yeah. So this is kind of like last time too. Let's. You can put your X500 under multiple if you want to do multiple, but just kind of put your X500 under the things that the teams who think you'll be interested in kind of working with. That way I can kind of add you to the email groups.
I put mine down last week. I never got an email.
You never got an email?
Yeah.
What group did you put down for?
Hosting.
Hosting?
Yeah.
Let me. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Hosting. So none of these are you?
The Lake 0117. Mine's Lake 0112.
That I probably misread that. Yeah. All right. I will.
I have sloppy handwriting.
No, I know that world. Like
Yeah, the 011. There's this
oh
one.
0112?
Yeah.
Alright.
There.
Lake 0112?
Let's get it.
Alright. Nice. Yep.
Okay. I haven't been able to attend any of the meetings since the first one. Is there any prior experience needed for any of these?
No. I reference when it uses something that we've gone over, I reference what the session or what we did in the session.
Okay.
And all our sessions are on our website. So if you want to refer back, you could always just kind of watch through.
Okay.
But it's a lot of stuff is like all new stuff, like for hosting CloudFront, for API using CloudFormation, which those are neither of those are things we've done in this, which is why they're part of the team activity. And again, with your teams, that's just if you want to like ask each other help or work with each other, you can coordinate that amongst kind of yourselves. And if you need any like help, just again send an email. All right, so. So if everyone could maybe do introductions, kind of more for the new people. Yeah, just kind of introduce yourselves. Yeah, I'm Cody. Yeah. Yeah. Yep, so that's what I used for the S3 session. Yeah, so if you look at you'll look at static site again. To add it, you have to add it in this do CloudFront. For this first week, I kind of want you, at least initially, to go like to your console, try to add CloudFront there, make it type in that platform. And practice kind of creating a distribution and what it looks like. And again, when you're testing stuff, remember to remove it after use. That's just a general policy. And then just kind of look into, like, they have public on the spec what they are. Do. Work this, if you have an S3 bucket with some HTML document, kind of look through it. Like easier to connect. But yeah. And then also you look at, you go to the human GitHub. How have you fill up those human cloud website? I also kind of go through. This is how I did the CDN for the human cloud website. So you can use that as a kind of backbone, like a template. What I really want you to do is kind of understand CloudFront a little bit going forward. Nice. And if let's finish up this database stuff, and then we can go back to groups for the rest of the time, because it's finally available, our database to work with. So right here, this is our database. Pretty low utilization, except for when it was making the copy, the backup. So this is what it looks like. I believe Amazon is working on a kind of view to add stuff to your database. We don't have it right now. So if you want to work with your database, you actually have to go to the console or some other database wizard that you have. So for Postgres, I've already kind of looked it up. This is the command that you run. So let me PSQL, I'll make this readable, -- host equals, and it's a DB instance endpoint. Because we made it public, it's an endpoint that we can access from our own machine. If we'd made it private, then what we would have to do is we would have to SSH into an EC2 instance we had that was public, that instance had access to this private database. So we'd have that extra layer that we'd have to walk through, which would make the database more secure. People wouldn't be able to just keep hitting it, trying to find the password. But you'd have to have that instance available, and you'd have to kind of go through that, which would be the downside. So if we look here, here's the endpoint. I'm gonna copy, I'm gonna get rid of this. Host equals that. We also need, we can exclude the port. The default is 5432. Ignore that. Username, -- username is AWS master. This is what we set it up to be. And if you follow, yeah. And then the DB name is the actual database we're connecting to, which is right here, human cloud _temp. The password TEMP1234, and we're in the database. So if you guys follow along, you'll also be able to log into the same kind of database instance. You'd have to copy this gobbledygook, which would be painful, but so yep. So if we do -dt, there are no tables. So we'd have to actually start making kind of tables for this to actually have. So let's see if I remember create. Ooh, I don't remember how to create a table. Anyone remember how to create a table in SQL? Let's create something. All right, nice. So create table, table name, let's just say this will just be filled of, let's say it's users, user table. And let's see, we'll have what? We'll have their ID be some sort, and then you can kind of see it here. ID be some sort of int, and then for their name, let's make it be a string of length, let's say 20 character string. So now we created a table we can work with. We have one relation, our users table, and we can actually start adding users to this table. So yeah, insert, let's see if I can get this right. Insert one Bob. Let's insert into users ID, comma, name, 1, comma, Bob. That doesn't sound right. Yeah. SQL insert into value. Okay. Insert into users values 1 Bob. Insert into users ID name values 1 Bob. There we go. I believe the issue here was the single versus double quoting. That's something, at least for Postgres, to be aware of. So now select everything from users, and we can see we have our one user in here. So does anyone else want to try and connect to this database? I can kind of help you guys connect to this, and you can kind of play around in this database a bit. Yeah, again, boom, boom, boom. This is the this top right up here is the command, and then the password is just temp1234. Yeah. So can I get a show of hands of who wants to kind of connect to this database and try stuff out? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, let me know if you need any kind of help connecting to the database. The only thing we have left after this is to just straight up delete the database and all the backups. Yeah, so if you aren't going to be connecting to this database, you can again kind of start going into your groups. If you are connecting to it, then let me know when you get in. If we have any struggles getting in. Okay, so what I just did was I copied the command and I put it on the website. If you go to the website, there'll be another post databases where you can copy and paste that in order to log into it. That way you don't have to kind of try and type it. So have you been able to kind of get into the database? Yep, I pasted it. If you go to the website, it'll be the latest blog post. It'll look like the previous one about the team projects because I didn't change much. I just added the line right there that you can copy and paste into your terminal. If you have, I guess if you have PSQL. Again, RDS, it's a bit more difficult to kind of get set up and work with, but it's a more powerful database all in all. And most data you work with at the enterprise level will be in some sort of relational database. Yeah, so that's kind of it. All I'm going to do after this is delete the database. But yeah. Have you guys had any, those who are trying to log into the database, have you come up across any issues?
Because I try connect to my database work and try yours doesn't work.
Let me try something.
Okay.
I think there's like dash dash DB.
Yeah. Did I not put that up here? Oh, yeah, it's 2 dashes right here. 2 dashes for each one. Let's see. Okay, try it now. Alright, so what the issue might have been is by default, it said that you would only accept traffic that came from a certain IP subnet range. I assumed we'd all be within the same IP subnet range, but that might not have been the case. So what I did is I changed it to accept traffic from anywhere in the world. And I just changed that in the security group.
My dash character is different from the one you posted up, so it's giving me problems.
I can't help you with that one. Nice. So now you're in the database. You can play around. Do you want to try and add someone to the user table? And then I'll be able to display the user.
What was the password?
TEMP1234.
Any capital or anything? Or...
Nice. Yeah, and then a semicolon. Oh yeah, the certain two users. Sure. Nice.
And there, I was able to display you putting your name into the DB.
Oh, that's like AWS versus like.
Nope. We don't need AWS to be running stuff in RDS. You just need the PSQL for this, for Postgres.
Oh, tab.
Nice. So that's kind of how you use RDS and how you can kind of connect to the instance. Anyone else who's trying to connect, do so quickly. I'm going to kill the database. Alright, I'll leave it there for now. What? What? Are you trying to put something in there? If you do, I can display it. Do you want me to? Not anymore. It's too far gone. Alright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete, so I will not create a final snapshot. Enter the phrase delete me. Wow, they really do want to make this hard. Alright. This is a snapshot. It might be deleting somewhere else. So right now it's deleting. Just make sure, just general policy when you're testing stuff out, clean up resources when you're done. That way you don't ever run the risk of getting charged for them. I've never had this be an issue, but there have been people who've like spun up 12 EC2 instances and then just left them on. And since you pay per use, you're gonna pay for those. Like, yeah. Yeah, it'll take some time to delete. Going to